there will be few changes in this meeting. Good evening, everyone, to all the participants who have joined this meeting. Uh, this being our own meeting, not any special meeting. I'm going to just mute everybody, but then you can unmute yourself. Access will be given to you, and the chat box will also be open. You can send messages to anyone who wants to, but uh, when the session is on, it is requested not to keep sending chats here and there because the speakers get distracted at times. So, keeping that in mind, I think we can go ahead with the meeting. And another request is that whenever anyone is asking questions, please turn on the video while asking the questions. If that facility is not there, then it is a different issue. But then if it is there, please do turn on the video. Thank you, everyone.
This morning I was not able to turn it on.
No problem, ma'am. Whatever be the reason, but so that the speaker can see who is asking the question, and then it becomes more easier.
It's easier that way.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let me just say this. Actually, see, we had finished the first part of valuation the other day, which I had completed. Okay, now we are going to go into the next part, which is the valuation rules, which, as the other day I said that we have to resolve only after the first part is, it is going to fail. So this is primarily going to be taken by Mr. Raghavan Ramabhadran, which will be followed by a panel discussion. In that panel discussion, primarily Mr. Joseph Prabhakar, Vishwanathan, and myself will be, participating. Of course, it is open to all others also, so you can participate in the panel discussion. But it will be kind of headed by the three of us along with Mr. Ramabhadran, right? You can take yourself during the presentation. Thank you. Mr. Raghavan, you can start.
Raghavan, sir, I'll just mute everyone, and then you can unmute yourself and start, sir. Even you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll be on unmute only.
No, I'm muting everyone for now. Then you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Prithvi, you can maybe mute everyone except Aparna madam and maybe she may.
Raghavan, sir, I can't hear you.
Oh. So, is it better now?
Yes, sir.
So, what I was suggesting is you can maybe unmute all of us. Maybe
Yes.
Aparna madam and I alone unmuted. You can mute all of us. We both alone will unmute. Why? Because so we both are owning this session. So if there is something, she might also chip in.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
A very good evening to all of you. This is the first topic on which we are having a second session in the series of sessions which we are having. That is on valuation. This topic demands such detailed analysis and detailed discussion. As we all know that GST itself is an ad valorem levy. So unlike what we had in excise, etc., where on some goods the levy is not based on value, but an ad hoc amount is prescribed by the government, it was paid like this. No part of GST is like that. So GST is levied only as a percentage of value. Therefore, it's essential that whenever there is a discussion on GST, we need to know what is the rate and what is the value, among other things. There are other, of course, we need to know what the levy is and on whom the incidence of taxes. But the aspect which is also very, very important is what is the value on which GST is payable. So on this count only, this was always treated as a very, very important topic. And I see that there is a comment saying that voice is feeble.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Though your voice is actually very feeble, sir. Can you adjust, sir?
I will keep trying. Prithvi, you tell me wherever there is a problem, because it seems there is a problem with the internet connection. So is that okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So therefore, valuation becomes a very, very important topic. On this count, Mrs. Aparna has taken us through the provision relating to valuation, namely section 15 and all the 5 subsections of section 15. She had dealt with what the value is under GST, namely transaction value, concepts relating to transaction value, what are the inclusions, what are the exclusions, and the provision in section 15.4 which leads us to the valuation rules, and also the government's power to provide for the value. So these are the various things which he has already dealt with. Now, the topic which we will be dealing is the rules relating to valuation. This flows from section 15 itself. 15 subsection 4 leads us to these rules. When should we go to the valuation rules? This is the first question which we counter. These are the situations in which we will be forced to go to the valuation rules. Number one is there is consideration, but as we all know, under GST, the consideration need not always be monetary. Even non-monetary consideration is permitted under GST. So therefore, wherever there are cases where the consideration is fully non-monetary or even partly non-monetary, in those situations, we have to resort to the valuation rules. So first situation is where consideration is not wholly in money. Second is there can be transactions between distinct persons or related persons, in which case the value which they have adopted for the transaction will be rejected and the value will be determined only based on the valuation rules. This is basically again the principle of arm's length, which we have in income tax also, which we have in customs also, and the same thing is borrowed under GST also. Basically between related parties, the consideration is always tainted by the relationship. Therefore, we need to determine a value which is at par with the market price of the product. Third is supply is made or received through an agent. So wherever there is a transaction involved through an agent, we have already seen that Schedule 1 also deems transactions with an agent also as an independent supply. So it's not a supply made by me to a customer through an agent. There are actually not a single supply, but there are more than one supply. So in all those situations, wherever the transaction is with an agent, since there is no sale consideration between me and the agent, the valuation rule has to come in to find out what is the transaction value for the purpose of GST. We are not talking about the commission, but we are talking about the value of the good supplied or value of the service which is supplied. So for that purpose, we need the valuation rules. Fourth is there are specific transactions like money changing transactions, tokens or vouchers, or a transaction where there is an involvement of a pure agent, or foreign exchange, that is the money changer. Then we have travel agents. So all these things, there are specific rules like what we had under the service tax regime also. Under Rule 6, here also we have separate provisions relating to the valuation for specific kinds of transactions. So these are the various broad reasons why we are forced to resort to the valuation rules. Now we will be dealing with each rule in a seriatim fashion. So Rule 27. Rule 27 is where the valuation rules start. That talks about a situation where the consideration is not wholly in money. Where the consideration is not wholly in money, that means consideration may be partly in money or consideration may be wholly in non-money. So an exchange transaction or a barter transaction without involvement of money, that also needs to be valued under this. Or there can be situations where the consideration is paid partly in money and partly in some other consideration. In that situation also, this provision needs to be resorted to. If you compare broadly with the old regime and all, then issues like fiat, etc., arise only for this kind of transaction. What is the consideration? Whether there is consideration more than what is agreed, how to value that consideration which is more than the agreed consideration, which is non-monetary. All those issues arise out of this kind of a scenario. So the first scenario is when consideration is not fully in money, how to determine? The rule says you have to adopt open market value only. So wherever the consideration is not wholly in money, you go by open market value. Only when the open market value is not determinable, then you can determine the money value of the non-monetary consideration and add it to the money consideration. That is, the illustration is given here itself, which I'll be dealing with. I'll give a different illustration which is there in the provision, but not covered in my slide. For example, I sell a laptop to you, and you sell your printer to me. Okay. Let me say I am selling my laptop to you at 40,000, on the premise that you will be giving your printer to me free of cost. So when I sell my laptop to you, what I receive in return is not just 40,000 rupees, but I am also receiving the printer which you have. In that case, is the value of my laptop 40,000, which I show as if it is 40,000, or is it 40,000 plus printer? That question arises. It is clear that this printer is given only in return for the laptop which I am selling you. Therefore, this printer also forms part of the consideration, but this printer is not directly available in money terms. The printer value is not in money terms. Therefore, you have to find out the value of the printer. If the value of the printer is 5,000, then the consideration for the laptop will be 45,000. How did I arrive at? That is because sum total of consideration in money 40,000, and if any further amount in money, that is equivalent to the consideration not in money. So what is the consideration not in money? What is the money value of that amount? That consideration that will be added, 45,000 will be the value. Third is where 1 and 2 is not determinable. That is, open market value is not determinable. Money value of non-monetary consideration is not determinable. Then in that case, you have to determine the value based on supply of like, kind, and quality. What is the value of goods or services which are of like, kind, and quality? This is also a defined phrase, like, kind, and quality. We will deal with it when we in the subsequent slides. For the moment, you just keep in mind that the third method of valuation is value based on like, kind, and quality. Please note that these rules have to be applied sequentially for the reason that first it is open market value, then it says only when open market value is not determinable, you go to the money value of non-monetary consideration. Only when these two are not determinable, then only you come to value of supply of like, kind, and quality. And if you see the fourth one, if all 1, 2, and 3 are not determinable, then only you go to cost-based method or residual method. And it also says in that order. That is also extremely important. It will say rule 30 and rule 31 in that order. That means first you have to apply cost-based method, then only you can go to residual method. What is cost-based method? What is the residual method, etc. We will see later. But this is the sequence which is provided to us. Now, this broadly we are depicting it in the form of a picture. First is open market value. Not possible, then you come to money consideration plus money value of non-monetary consideration. Then you have to go with determination of value by comparison, like goods or services of like, kind, or quality, and then you have to come to cost-based method, which is 110% of cost of production or cost of manufacture or cost of acquisition. This is also to take care of non-manufacturers who will be there. So cost of acquisition or in that order. So if cost-based method is not possible, then you go to a residual method where you determine the value on reasonable means. So this is the sequence that is provided for. What is open market value? The first and foremost method prescribed is determined based on open market value. What is open market value? Open market value is the full value in money. Of course, it excludes all this GST. Full value in money, which is payable by a person in a transaction occurring at the same time as the supply which is being valued, where the supplier and recipient are not related and price is the sole consideration. So this is also similar to transaction value to the extent that it talks about a not related price is the sole consideration. But still, it is not the same because it talks about a supply which is relatable to the present supply. So for a supply which is made now, if you are trying to determine the open market value of this supply, of the product involved in this supply, you are now looking outside, not within the transaction, but you are looking outside the transaction. Outside the transaction, at or about the same time, for the very same product, how much is the payment that is made? And that should be in an uncontrolled transaction. That is in a transaction where the buyer and seller are not related. where the entire consideration is only in monetary terms. So if you determine that kind of a transaction, and whatever is the money paid in that other transaction, that will be deemed to be the market value, and that value will be applied for this transaction. So this is called as open market value. So open market value is a method which is prescribed where you don't determine the value by looking into the transaction, but you determine the value looking outside the transaction, something which is happening at around about the same time in a different transaction. Shall I move on? Next. So this is the illustration, not my illustration. This is given in the provision itself, in the rule itself. Let us say there is a phone. The phone is priced at 24,000, but it is supplied at 20,000 because of an exchange of old phone. The old market value of the new phone is the open market value of the new phone is 24,000. So they have given the answer. So a phone which is otherwise valued at 24,000 is supplied at 20,000 because of an exchange of old phone. So the steps to be adopted is whether this 20,000 can be treated as a value. Prithvi, you don't need to talk to me, but just check if you can remove these scribblings on the screen. If it is possible at your end, you can just see. Okay. So the phone.
Sir, with that, sir, the scribbling, actually, whoever has done it can only remove it, sir. I cannot erase it. I'm trying to do that, but I cannot erase it, sir.
Okay, can you disable it?
So I have to disable the screen sharing and then again repost it, sir. Can I do that?
No, you request everyone to not to scribble, that's all.
No,
Yes.
no.
I request the participants, please do not touch the pen mark on the screen sharing and scribble, because if you scribble, it is seen to everyone. So, and if in case you've done it by mistake, you yourself can kindly erase it. I cannot erase it from here. So please
Yes,
do the.
that is better. Yeah.
No, the reason why I
Thank
took it here is it will help us in conducting the important sessions. So we can learn it from
Yes,
here.
sir, correct.
Don't think it's a
I understand.
distraction. Yeah. Okay, I'll proceed further. So here
Yes.
is a transaction where they have not asked us to determine the open market value. They have given that the open market value is 24,000. They have said this phone is priced at 24,000. So they have given that in an uncontrolled transaction, this phone usually is sold at 24,000. So there's a given. The transaction which is there for us to determine is a transaction where there is an exchange of old phone for a new phone. When an old phone is given to the seller and a new phone is given by the seller to the buyer, then the seller charges only 20,000. The first question to be asked is this 20,000 a transaction value directly under section 15(1) of the value of the GST Act? The clear answer is no. It is not directly a value under transaction value under section 15(1) for the simple reason that the consideration which is flowing is not just money. So price is not the sole consideration. The parties may be unrelated, but price is not the sole consideration. Therefore, you cannot directly take 20,000 as the value. So how much should be the value? This price, this phone is usually sold at 24,000 generally. During that point in time where our supply is happening, that time also this phone is being sold.
Sorry, Raghavan, your voice is getting diminished. It's not very clear. So,
Yeah, I will repeat. So,
Yes, sir, it is fluctuating, sir.
repeat that. Yeah. Repeat that.
I'm having this challenge. Yeah, I will repeat it. So, the price at which usually this model of phone is sold is 24,000, right? That is a given fact. Now, because I am selling it for an exchange rate of 20,000, price is not the sole consideration. Therefore, 20,000 has to be directly rejected, and you have to go to the valuation rules. Going to the valuation rules, Rule 27 first provides that you have to determine the open market value. Open market value is available in this case because this model of phone in an uncontrolled transaction is sold at 24,000. Therefore, you have to determine the value as 24,000 only. Okay, that is the open market value for the transaction. A doubt may arise, sir, why should I determine as 24,000? Should I not determine the exchange, the value of the old phone? Let us say the value of the old phone is 6,000. Why don't I see if this old phone which is exchanged Let me find out the open market value of the old phone. Usually this model of phone with so much years of usage is sold at 6,000, let us say. Then is it possible for the department to say that 20,000 is the money value received? Open market value of the old phone is 6,000. Therefore, can the department tax it as 26,000? That's the first question. Basically, what we are doing is we are taking the money value plus we are determining the money value of the non-money consideration, and we are adding these two. So, can we say 20,000 plus 6,000 is the value? The answer to that is no, we cannot do that, because if you go back in the hierarchy says first you have to determine only the open market value. Only when the open market value is not determinable, C2, only when open market value is not determinable, then you can go and find out the money value of the old phone. But here, since the open market value of the new phone is determinable, the buck stops there. Don't try to determine the value of the old phone. That is not required. One may argue that the value of old phone is only 2,000. One may argue value of old phone is 6,000. All those things are irrelevant. Because we have an open market value for the new phone, what is the value for the old phone is an irrelevant question here. Therefore, the value on which the tax needs to be paid is 24,000 only. This is irrespective of the value of the old phone. Don't get into the value of the old phone. But the interesting part is, if you are seeing if it is a supply in the hands of the buyer, because buyer has given the old phone, can that be treated as a supply by the buyer to the seller of the old phone? If that amounts to a supply, there you may have to determine the value of the old phone. There it may be relevant for you to determine what is the open market value, etc. of the old phone. But when we are talking about the new mobile phone supplier, in his hands, so long as open market value of this model of phone is available, it is irrelevant to see what is the open market value of the old phone. So therefore, that is why this illustration is given. As per this illustration, we have to pay tax on 24,000. Right? I'll move on to the next one. Next is, as we saw, there is something called supplies of like kind or quality. So supply of goods or services of like kind or quality is what it says. Here, it is a defined term. It says supplies of goods of like kind or quality means the supplies are made under similar circumstances that in respect of characteristics, quality, quantity, functional components, materials, and reputation in which one is the same or closely or substantially resembles the other. So basically what we are talking about is two products. It's easy to explain with goods than with service. So I'm taking the goods example while it is also applicable for services. If let us say Oppo phone versus let us say Vivo, I presume there are models which are identical. These are not of the same brand, but the characteristics, the quality, quantity, functional components, reputation, all of it may be substantially similar. Substantially similar, that one phone can be considered as of the same kind or quality as the other. You cannot compare Samsung Galaxy, some top-end phone, with some other lower-end phone of, let us say, Oppo. You cannot compare. These are not of the right kind or quality. But between Oppo and Vivo, almost of this similar configuration, you may treat one as of the same kind or quality as the other. So therefore, we have to determine what are the comparables, and accordingly, we have to determine the value for that. Please remember, you will resort to this rule only when you don't have the open market value of the goods which is supplied. Then this cost-based or residual method of valuation, what it says is, under the cost-based method, it is 110% of the cost of production or manufacture if you are a manufacturer, or if you are a trader, or if you are a person who has bought from somebody, then 110% of the cost of acquisition. That will be treated as the cost-based value for your goods which is acquired, or cost of provision of services. The last method is determining value employing reasonable means. What is reasonable? Reasonable to whom? All those problems remain. Like it is our rule 11 of excise or any other rule. Always we had this best judgment method or method of determining value based on reasonable means. The service provider alone has one option. The service provider, if you remember, I was saying that between these two rules, that is cost of goods, that is 110%, and residual method, you have to apply in that order. That in that order means first you have to apply cost method. If that fails, then only you have to go to residual method. That's what in that order means. But for service provider alone, there is an option. He alone can switch the hierarchy. He alone can switch the order of application of these rules. So for him, if he is a supplier of services, he has the option of ignoring the cost-based method, and he can directly go for the reasonable means method, residual method, wherever he has to determine the value. So this option is available only for supplier of services. This is what Rule 27 says. Now, if we are going to Rule 28. So Rule 27 is a situation where the supply is not just of for money consideration, but there is also something more than money which is flowing between the parties. Rule 28 is specifically designed for cases where the transaction is happening between related persons or distinct persons. So in that situation alone, Rule 28 is applicable. Here again, the law says you have to apply the open market value. So therefore, the same method. Open market value definition is the same. For the whole chapter, open market value is defined only in that manner. So first method is open market value. If open market value is not determinable, then you have to determine the value based on value of like goods of or service of like kind and quality. So similar to that. So next is like kind and quality. Here, of course, the second method there was money equivalent of the non-monetary consideration. That is, of course, not there here, because here the consideration is either not there or whatever is there is insufficient. We are not dealing with a situation where consideration is in money or non-money. Third situation is where 1 and 2 are not determinable. Then apply cost-based or residual method in that order. So similar thing. You may ask a question: what if there is a consideration between related parties, which is partly in money and partly in non-money terms? So a combination of 27 and 28. You may ask that question, sir, what to do if the consideration is partly in money and partly not in money, and the transaction is between related parties? In that case also, as usual, you have to first determine the open market value. You have to determine the open market value. If open market value is not available, I would think that Rule 28 would take precedence than Rule 27. So therefore, you have to directly go to value of supply of goods of like kind or quality. In other words, you will not have the option of determining the money value of non-monetary consideration and adding it, etc. That is the second method which was available in Rule 27. Will never be applicable for supplies between related persons. This is what I think. Others may comment at the end of the session. If 1 and 2 methods,
1 minute.
values are
Just
not
1 minute.
available. Yes.
Sorry, Raghavan. Just before you proceed, just explain about this distinct persons. Of course, most of us would know about it, but just for clarity, just please explain about the distinct person concept also, which is distinct to GST, so that everyone will be in a position to.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Aparna madam. So the suggestion that is made is first we should also deal with the distinct person. If you remember the first session I took on supply, we were discussing on the Schedule 1 transactions, wherever there are transactions which is happening even without a consideration. In some circumstances, that can be treated as a supply. One of the circumstances that was discussed was where the transaction is happening between related parties or distinct persons. So what is distinct persons is all dealt with in section 25, etc. By definition, distinct person means a person who has a PAN number, right? So therefore, there is a PAN number. There are 2 or 3 GST registrations. So 2 or 3 GST registrations, but all these GST registrations has a single PAN number. So for example, there is a company. Company would have one PAN number, but that company may be operating from different states. GST law requires that in every state where you are making a supply, you have to take a GST registration. So what happens is that very same company will have more than one GST registration. Let us say it has 5 GST registrations. Though they have 5 GST registrations in different states, or maybe sometimes in the same state, like I was explaining for SEZs, etc. Though they have 5 GST numbers, they will have single PAN number. So in that case, each and every registration of that company in all these 5 states or these 5 registrations are treated as distinct persons. So if GST registration 1 makes a supply to GST registration 2, if you see from the legal entity perspective, there is no supply made because it is from one person to the other. There is no two persons, it is supplied to self. But under the GST context, these are supplies to distinct persons because they have different GST registrations. So distinct person means having single PAN number but more than one GST registration. They are treated as distinct persons. The treatment of distinct persons is more or less at par with related persons. See, holding and subsidiary, if you assume that any transaction between holding and subsidiary will be tainted by relationship, then there is no reason to assume that same company's transactions will not be tainted, isn't it? It's a degree even more closer than a holding subsidiary. So therefore, distinct person cases also, the value is rejected straight away, and therefore you have to adopt the valuation rules. So distinct person is same company but different GST registrations. Okay, so distinct persons, related persons, for both these supplies, this rule will be applicable. As I said, open market value is always the first method. That is not possible, then you go to the supply of like kind or quality. If that is not possible, you go to the cost based method, or after that only in that order. So therefore, if cost based method is not possible, then you go to residual method. This is what the rule says. But there are two very important provisos in this rule. The first proviso in this rule says, if the supply is further made, so therefore there is a supply which is made, so I am the recipient of supply, let us say, and I make a further supply. If I make a further supply of goods, then the supplier may pay tax on 90% of the price charged for the goods of like kind or quality on further sales to unrelated buyers. So take a situation, I am buying goods from, I am a trader, let us say, and I am buying goods from somebody. Let us say I am buying goods at 100 rupees. Then I supply to distinct persons. Let us say I stock transfer to my various GST registrations. I may be adopting a stock transfer value. Let us say I am transferring goods at exactly 100 only. So therefore I receive at 100, and at the cost price I am stock transferring goods to my various registrations. Fine. But the very same goods which I am doing a trading activity, which I am reselling, when I sell to an unrelated party, then I am selling these goods at, let us say, 120 rupees. So when I am doing a stock transfer, I adopt the same price, that is 100. But when I am selling to an unrelated buyer, I am charging 120 rupees. In such case, what should be the transaction value? Of course, you will find the open market value, but the other option you have is, since you are making a further supply, you can resort to the proviso. The proviso says you can adopt 90% of the price which is charged to unrelated buyer. So on 120, you can apply 90%, and you can say you will pay tax on the value by treating the value as 108. 90% of 120. So your 100, what your stock transferring at cost price is rejected. But open market value may be 120, let us assume, but you don't need to go by open market value also. This proviso says you can adopt 90%, therefore you can stock transfer at 108 rupees. Please remember, this is available only for supplier of goods. This is not for supplier of services, right? This is the first proviso. there is a second proviso to that. The second proviso is applicable for both goods and services. The first proviso is applicable only for goods supplier. Second proviso is applicable for both supplier of goods and services. The second proviso says, forget all of these things. Forget 90%, forget open market value, forget everything. You make a supply, you charge some amount of the invoice, no problem at all. But if the recipient is eligible for full ITC on your invoice, if full ITC, you have satisfied all the requirements of input tax credit, if full input tax credit is available in the hands of the recipient, then whatever price you have shown on the invoice, that will be deemed to be the open market value. Therefore, don't go any further. We will accept your invoice price. That's all. It's a simple method. Only test is the distinct person, the other end, the distinct person at the other end, or the related person at the other end, will be eligible for full ITC. This word full is very important. Sir, 99.9% credit is available, sir. That is not full. Sir, 90% available, not full. Full means 100%. If full ITC is eligible on the supply made under this invoice, then the value which you have adopted in the invoice is sufficient. Let us take the same example. You receive at 100, you stock transfer at 100. The same goods, when you sell to unrelated buyer, you are selling at 120. Open market value may be 120, etc. But you have to only see whether your recipient, the distinct person in the other state, whether he will be eligible for full credit or not. If he is entitled for credit, you don't need to adopt 120 as value. You don't need to adopt 90% of 120, which is 108 also. If you have raised an invoice for 100, that 100 will be deemed to be open market value. If you have raised an invoice for 95 only, that 95 will be deemed to be open market value. If you have raised an invoice for 105, 105 will be deemed to be open market value. In fact, if you had raised an invoice for 150, that 150 may also be treated as open market value, because whatever you have charged on your invoice will be the open market value. Ensure that there is nothing more in the matter. That is, if you have invoiced for the reason of passing on excess credit, all those things will be subject to scrutiny. But this rule says whatever value you have charged on the invoice, that will be deemed to be open market value. At this stage, we have to deal with one advanced ruling in the case of spec makers, which came under the GST scenario. Spec makers transaction was, they used to import or procure all these glasses, frames, lenses, all these things from various people. They don't manufacture, they always procure this. After procuring this, they used to stock transfer these items to their various shops in different states. In each of those states, they are separately registered. They import it or procure it in Tamil Nadu. They are registered under GST in Tamil Nadu. And from Tamil Nadu, they used to stock transfer to various people. What they were doing was, since they were stock transferring, and according to them, since full ITC was available to the recipient, they were stock transferring at a lesser value. They treated that value to be the transaction, the open market value, and they were paying GST on that. They opted to go for an advance ruling. They applied for an advance ruling to see if what they are doing is right or not. When the matter came before the advance ruling authority said that you please read Rule 28. Rule 28 says the value shall be the open market value. It says shall. Therefore, open market value alone can be the value. When this rule says open market value as the first condition, you cannot directly go to the proviso. And that too, you are not going to the first proviso, you are jumping to the second proviso. That is wrong. All these rules have to be applied in sequence, in seriatim. Therefore, you have to adopt only open market value. If you are adopting the proviso method, that to the second proviso method, it is wrong. This is what the advance ruling authority held. The applicant there went on appeal, and the matter came before appellate authority for advance ruling. At the appellate authority for advance ruling level, they held there is nothing in Rule 28 to suggest that the provisions have to be applied only after you exhaust the main rules. Therefore, though open market value is the value, which is the first method, the proviso actually gives a bypass to all those things. And even in the proviso, there is nothing to say that you have to first apply the first proviso, and only when you fail in the first proviso, you have to go to the second proviso. There is nothing like that. Therefore, the applied authority for advanced ruling clearly held that a person, if he is eligible, he can directly opt for the second proviso. And therefore, the applied authority for advanced ruling rejected the first, set aside the first order of the authority for advanced ruling and held that if full ITCs are eligible, one can take whatever value in the invoice as the value, as the open market. This is what they held. To my mind, I feel that there is a slightly different way of putting it. According to me, the second proviso is not a new method. Under the second proviso also, we are only determining the open market value. So still we are on the first one in the rule only. That is, the rule says you have to apply the open market value in a transaction between distinct or related persons. The second proviso only gives a method for determining the open market value. So open market value is what it says. How to determine open market value? There is a definition for open market value. This proviso says for the purpose of this rule, that open market value method as defined is also open market value. And over and above that, if you satisfy this condition, you can deem your invoice value as open market value. So therefore, if we go to the second proviso, it is not a new method. According to me, second proviso is also only the first rule. It's also giving a further clarity on the first rule, namely the value will be the open market value, because the second proviso is only giving a new meaning to open market value. Therefore, in my mind, I completely agree with the advanced ruling authority, that is the applied authority for advanced ruling. And I'm just adding one more reason, that second proviso is not a new method. That is also the same method as open market value method. This also people may note. If there is anything to add, you can add at the end. But Aparna Madam alone can add immediately if she wants.
I think we'll discuss in the panel discussion itself. I don't want to disturb your flow.
Okay. So the next rule is valuation of supplies, where it is made between principal and agent, right? So between principal and agent, how to determine the value? Here it says open market value again. Wherever it is principal and agent or agent and principal, it is open market value. Like the earlier one, here also it says 90%, but 90% of value of like kind and quality charged by agent or principal to his unrelated customer. Very similar to what we discussed earlier. So wherever the principal sells to unrelated customer or agent sells to unrelated customer, take that value. On that value, 90%.
Raghavan,
Yes.
Raghavan, 1 minute. I think there are comments that your voice is slightly breaking. Can you do something about it? Audio is a little bad. See, the lecture is so good that because of this voice diminishing aspect, people are finding it difficult.
Yes, there's some fluctuation, sir. It suddenly comes out clearly and then again it goes down, sir.
Everyone is.
Like
Sir, it is definitely due to internet connection only, sir. You can probably try to address it.
In fact, that is the reason I'm sitting in the balcony. And Prithvi's voice is very good. Very
I'm sitting in.
Your voice is also very good.
Okay. But I think he's holding the mic like this and talking properly. It is moving.
ரெண்டு device இருக்குல்ல அதனால problem.
Sir, இல்ல sir. It's only because of
clearly
No,
due to
please
internet
continue.
Raghavan sir, you try with the earphone itself, sir, because without the earphone it is even more unclear.
Is
So,
it-
but you have to adjust your earphone, sir.
Is it clear now?
Yeah, now it's fine.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
clearly
fine,
due
sir.
to internet connection. In fact, I tried to address also, but there is limited
It is
movement
clear,
from
sir.
him
It's
also.
perfect now.
Oh, this is clear. This is clear. Please continue.
I'll continue.
You can start, sir.
Everyone, Prithvi.
Yes, sir.
So
I'll mute everyone. Raghavan sir, you can unmute yourself, please.
So this rule is for valuation
sir.
between principal and agent. As we said, it is deemed to be a supply between principal and agent. As we all know that between principal and agent, it is a valid contract even if there is no consideration. You all remember section 25 of the Indian Contract Act. So even without consideration, it's a valid contract. But here in GST, it is deemed to be a supply and there is deemed to be a consideration, and that consideration has to be determined by some method, and that method is this. Please remember, we are not trying to value the commission here. What we are trying to value is the actual goods which goes through the agent, or actual services which goes through the agent. We are not talking about the consideration which the principal is liable to pay to the agent. We are talking about whatever goes through the agent to the ultimate buyer or seller, depending on whether the agent is a buying agent or selling agent. So what I'm trying to say is, here wherever it is agent relationship, there also, like what we saw, that 90% of the value of the supply to unrelated buyer. Similarly, here also you have to see what will be the value of the goods which will be supplied to unrelated customer. On that value, you can apply 90% and you can deem that as the value for the purpose of this supply also. If that is not determinable again, then only you can go to cost plus method, or rule 31 is reasonable means, again in sequence. So this is also similar. Open market value, 90% method, and then 30. Please remember, the value of like kind and quality is not there. Here it is only 90% of value of like kind and quality. It is not the entire value of like kind and quality. Clearly keep in mind that there will be some margin at the agent's level also. So this is the reason why this is kept as 90%. This is what rule 29 will say. This is the last rule, the rule 30 and rule 31, which I said. Rule 30 we have already discussed, 110%. Rule 31 is reasonable means, right? Now, there are a few rules, that is few valuation methods for specified supplies. These are all various kinds of method for different kinds of supplies. We will deal with one by one. Let us say that a token is supplied or a voucher is supplied, and that token or voucher is redeemable further against a subsequent supply. How to determine the value of the token? So for that, the provision says money value of the goods or services or both redeemable against such token, voucher, coupon, or stamp. So what is the inherent value of the token? What is the value for which you can redeem that voucher for? That will be the value for the token itself. So this is what this provision says. Wherever a person is dealing in buying and selling of second-hand goods and no ITC is taken, so he is dealing with second-hand goods and he is not availing the benefit of input tax credit, there the valuation rule in 32(5) specifically will say difference between selling and purchase price, and if he is selling at a loss, then no value. The value should be taken as 0. So basically, if there is a seller who is selling second-hand goods, at what price he bought, what price he is selling, if the difference is positive, take that value, otherwise ignore it. Please remember, this rule will apply only if input tax credit is not taken. If anybody wants to take input tax credit, then they have to take the ultimate selling price, that will be treated as the value. Service of life insurance linked investment, etc., unit linked. So in these transactions, what will happen is, where separate amounts are identified, amount towards insurance will be the value, not insurance will be the value. In case of single premium annuity policies other than A, then 10% of single premium charge from the policy holder. All other cases, 25% of premium charge in first year and 12.5 in subsequent years. These are all very specific to insurance business. The next situation covered here is supply by notified persons to distinct persons where ITC is not allowed under section 17 subsection 5. This is a very innocuously placed rule, and it says it is applicable only where the supplies are made by notified persons. So far no notification has been issued on that. The notified person, when he makes supply to a distinct person, and if ITC is not allowed on that under 17.5, then they say the value will be nil. So far, this provision has been brought into effect for the reason that no notification has been issued. I'm doubting if it is to take care of some cross-charge situations where the head office has to cross-charge the branch and the branch is not eligible to take ITC of that. So I'm just posing it as a question. Will it give some relief to certain cross-charge cases, which Mr. G. Natarajan will be taking in detail when the session for a cross-charge comes? It is quite possible that where that credit is not available at the recipient's end, they want to treat the value itself as nil. Therefore, this goes out of the taxation ambit. In value of services provided by air travel agents, in that case, 5% of the fare in the domestic, in the case of domestic bookings, and 10% of the basic fare in case of international bookings. This is how the travel agent should pay tax. Wherever there is a foreign exchange dealer, so there are specific rules. Wherever rupee is to be converted into foreign exchange, if it is a buying rate or selling rate, depending on that, whatever it is, minus what is the rate which is prescribed by the Reserve Bank. So RBI reference rate is RR. BR is buying rate, SR is selling rate. So BR and SR different depending on whether you are buying or selling. Minus RBI reference rate. That difference, when it is positive, into number of units which you sell, that will be as the value in the hands of the foreign exchange trader. If the RBI reference rate is not available, then 1% of the rupee value provided or received, that will be treated as the commission. Please remember, this is not the tax, these are all values. On this, tax has to be paid. This is only the value. Where a foreign exchange is converted into another foreign exchange, so there is no INR as such involved. Let us say euro to dollar. In that case, the provision says it is 1% of some amount. What is that? X means lesser of the two amounts the person changing the money would have received by converting any of the two currencies into Indian rupee on that day at the RBI reference rate. So therefore, if it is, let us say, euro to dollar, then convert euro to rupee by applying RBI reference rate. Similarly, convert the Indian rupee to dollar, dollar to Indian rupee, apply the RBI reference rate. Then lower of these two, if you adopt on that 1%, that will be the value of the foreign exchange broker, right? So therefore, bring both to the INR denomination, and lower of the two will be treated as X. On that you apply 1%, that will be value of the service which is being provided by the forex agent. There are further rules in that. Because wherever there is money exchange, they are giving more options. Actually, if you see, the earlier slide only said it is option A, right? There is an option B available in this. This says if it is up to 1 lakh, the currency exchange if it is up to 1 lakh. 1 lakh here is INR, right? If it is up to 1 lakh, then the taxable value will be 1% of the gross amount of exchange. So therefore, earlier method is 1. This is option B. If it is up to 1 lakh, calculate 1% of it. If 1% is less than 250, minimum of 250, you can opt for this. Or if it is between 1 lakh and 10 lakhs. So if it is not less than 1 lakh and not more than 10 lakhs, that's how it should be. Please read it like that. Not less than 1 lakh and not more than 10 lakhs. So therefore, it is written as more than 1 lakh, less than 10 lakhs. In that case, it is 1000 rupees plus 0.5% of the gross amount. It is 1000 plus, it is not 1000 or, it is 1000 plus 0.5% of the gross amount. That will be treated as the commission. If it is exceeding 10 lakh, it is 5500 plus 0.1% of the gross amount. Here the maximum is only 60,000. So this is how you calculate the commission. Please remember, option A and option B, two options are there. But option B, if it is one success, so default option is A. If you opt for option B, then it will remain for the full financial year. You cannot change it. So once you choose option B will stick with you for the whole year. So 32A rule, which deals with Kerala floods, has specifically brought in. This only says that Kerala flood says if it is payable under the Kerala Finance Bill, it shall be deemed to the value determined in terms of 15, but shall not include such cess. So therefore, basically they are borrowing the valuation provision for the cess purpose also, but not including the cess. Now comes the concept of pure agent. This is the last concept which we'll be dealing with today. After which we will, I'm sure we will have a long session of discussion and a very rich session also. This pure agent as a concept is highly boring for all service tax practitioners now, because this have been dealt with in service tax also, and there has always been a difficulty in applying it strictly. The rules relating to that is pure. What is pure agent? There is a definition and there are some conditions. The definition for pure agent is a pure agent, and a person will become a pure agent only if he receives only the actual amount incurred by him to procure goods or services on behalf of his principal. Whatever the actual amount he has incurred, sorry, he should have receive the amount, basically the reimbursed from the principal only on actuals. He cannot receive more than the actuals. Next, he does not use the goods or services procured. So he should not use it for himself. He should be a pass-through. He should not hold or intend to hold title to the goods under our services procured or provided. As I said, he should be a pass-through. He cannot become a owner of it. He should contractually agree to act as the pure agent of the recipient and incurs costs in the course of providing the services. So basically, he should agree to be an agent. What are the conditions which are attached? Why are we reading pure agent? Is because if there is any amount which is received by a pure agent, that can be excluded from the value of service. So there we are seeing whether someone is a pure agent or not. The conditions for that is pure agent should make the payment to the third party for the goods or services procured. He should receive and use the goods or services procured by service provider in his capacity as pure agent, not as the actual user. He should use it only in the capacity as agent. The service recipient is liable to make payments to the third party. So actual liability is on the service recipient, but that service recipient will authorize the pure agent to make the payment on his behalf. Service recipient is aware that the payment made towards the goods or services shall be provided by the third party. So he is not acting for any undisclosed principal or undisclosed party. The payment made by the service provider on behalf of the service recipient has been separately indicated in the invoice issued. The service provider recovers from the service recipient only such amount as has been paid by him to the third party. That is again actuals. Goods and services procured by the service provider from the third party of the third party of the service recipient, or in addition, the services he provides on his own account. With all these things, we will see one example. This example is, there is a company A. Let us say this company A is providing legal consultancy services to B. Now the fees for such services is agreed. That is 1 lakh rupees. For the legal consultancy service, let us say the fee is 1 lakh rupees. Now, apart from the professional fees, company A recovers certain out-of-pocket expenses amounting to 10,000 rupees. So therefore, this is also related to this legal consultancy only. And some 10,000 is incurred as out-of-pocket expenses towards travel, accommodation, etc. The company also incurs an amount, say 1,000 rupees for filing fees, etc. Let us say this 1,000 is purely a court fee, which is a statutory payment, not anything beyond that. So it is an actuals. All these are later reimbursed by me at actuals. Now, to apply the concept of pure agent, the question which we ask is, what is the value of supply? To be precise on what is the value of supply, whether the recovery of travel and accommodation charges is includable in the value of legal service or not. So the travel and accommodation charges 10,000, whether that is includable in the value of legal service. Next is, what about the statutory payment, whether that is also includable in the value of legal service or not. These are the questions which are posed. The discussion on pure agent, so we have to see, so maybe we can leave it for the session. That's what we feel. Maybe you can add or supplement or say how it is wrong or right. Reimbursement of statutory payment, that can come under exception of pure agent, because clearly it is meant for the other person, it is on actuals also. Now, reimbursement in respect of services used by the supplier, whether that will be included in the transaction value, because in transaction value in the inclusion clause in 15.2, we have a clear case which talks about incidental expenses, including commission and packing, charged by supplier to the recipient, and any amount charged for anything done by the supplier in respect of, what is maybe in respect of supply of services at the time or before delivery thereof. So this is what is there. So in light of this, can we say that it's not just 1 lakh, it also includes the 10,000. So the question is whether it is 1 lakh 10,000 or 1 lakh. So even I have a different answer, but so that is all subject to various assumptions which we need to make to arrive at an answer. So with this, I leave it for all of you to come in, and we can take it as a further discussion. More than questions, we will style it as panel discussion where anybody can come up with questions or solutions or answers or discussions. We can have it like that. So for the time being, I am unmuting myself, or rather muting myself. You can unmute whoever isn't.
Yes, everyone. So now the discussion panel is on. So all of you, whoever wants to ask questions, I please request them to come one by one and ask questions. And you can unmute yourself. I need not unmute for anyone. But then make sure that you ask questions one by one so that there's no confusion.
Raghavan sir, can I start?
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Sir, as you know, there's a lot of issues relating to the valuation of our exports. A lot of refunds being denied, saying that they're being highly valued to get more GST refund. So when the customs adjudicate the matter, would they have to also go by these valuation principles which we discussed in establishing that goods have been overvalued? You have to unmute, I think, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, you are talking about GST.
Sir,
Raghavan, sir, we can't hear you.
Same problem. So you are talking about export, right, Hari?
yes, sir, export.
So
From
export,
customs,
yeah. So therefore, there is no GST at all on that. Therefore, we should not take recourse to GST valuation rules at all there.
so since levy of GST itself is not there, no question of
Itself is
referring to
not
this
there.
value.
Therefore, there is no
Valuation.
question of applying this. Yes, yes.
Referring to the valuation. Right. Thank you.
In fact, where is Joseph? I'm not able to see Joseph. Anyway,
I'm very much here.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I'm also able to see Natarajan. We're all supposed to stay at home, but he's in the beach.
Beach.
Yeah. Look at him.
It's a virtual background.
I understand. Of course, I understand. Anyway, Mr. Raghavan, you were discussing about advanced ruling, isn't it? Advanced ruling authority. Yes. In fact, I think there is some disturbance in the audio.
Ma'am, if you want me to mute everyone, I can still go ahead and mute
Yeah,
them.
please do that.
Prithvi,
Yes, sir.
the problem is whoever is unmuting, they must take care to probably close the door, windows, everything, because the sound is coming.
That is why I always keep everyone on mute.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. This is not exactly a question. I'm just trying to supplement whatever you said.
Yes.
You were saying that the proviso, there is 2 provisos which are available in Rule 28. The Appellate Authority for Advanced Ruling has ruled that it is not sequential application, but it goes along with the main part of the rule itself. This is my understanding. I actually agree, because if you see the first proviso which deal with supply of goods, that is the valuation for the purpose of supply of goods, it says at the option. Then in fact, you can even read the rule. And the second rule also does not talk about any sequential application. And therefore, these 2 provisos are applicable in the first application of the sequential rule. What I mean is, when we start applying the sequential rule one by one, it is still applicable at the first step itself. You need not have to exhaust and, by process of elimination, eliminate all the 3 steps and then come to the proviso. It is not like that. According to me, the Appellate Advanced Ruling Authority is correct. What is your view?
Yeah, what you are saying, in fact, opens up a very interesting point. That if you see the first proviso, as you very specifically pointed out, talks about at the option. If you see the second proviso, it does not talk about at the option at all.
Yes.
So, will it mean that in cases where full ITC is available, you cannot adopt any other transaction value, but you have to necessarily go by the invoice value? That is, you cannot determine normal open market, not transaction value. Can I say that you cannot adopt normal open market value at all? Once full ATC is available, you don't have an option of adopting normal open market value. You have to necessarily go by the invoice value. And that extent of interpretation also possible. And you see that because again, Professor 2 says the value in the invoice shall be the open market value.
Yes.
And it is, we also saw that it is only an extended arm for open market value determination only. It's not a new method.
Correct.
While 90% is a different method. Yeah, 90% is a different method and 90% is an option. Second proviso is not a different method. It's an elaboration on open market value and it is not an option. So therefore, even if you have open market value, please ignore that. Treat only the invoice value as open market value.
Correct. I agree.
Ramesh sir, you can come in, sir. Rohan, you can come in next.
Joseph, please come in. And Ramesh.
Before that, to supplement what Raghavan said, that second proviso to that rule puts the operation to section 15.1 and does not take it to 15.4. Am I right?
Yes, sir, absolutely, absolutely. The second proviso.
I didn't, Mr. Vishwanathan, I didn't get your question at all.
No. I am only supplementing the viewpoint Raghavan and you were telling.
Yeah.
The second proviso in Rule 28 otherwise means that the valuation rule does not apply to such transactions. It goes back to 15.1. It is deemed to be a 15.1 transaction and there is no need for market value of supply to be determined.
No. That may not be a correct interpretation, sir. That may not be a correct interpretation.
Sir, under 28, sir, if I am audible, under 28, there are two open market values.
Yes.
Please confirm if I am audible.
Yes.
Under 28, there are two open market values. One is the actual open
Why
market
is not
value.
hearing?
Okay. Under Rule 28, there are two open market values. One is the open market value as per the definition. Let us say, in my example, 120 is the open market value. Second is my invoice value, that is 100. Right?
Deemed value.
Yeah, my deemed open market value, which is 100. Now, if you are not eligible to claim this 100, because if credit is available, you fall back to 120. You don't go back to section 15. You still remain in Rule 28 itself. But in Rule 28, the second proviso becomes inapplicable. Therefore, you stick to 28 subclause A. That open market value is as defined under Rule 35. That is the value at which these kind of goods are usually sold. So that is what we need to take. So you will never go back to section 15. You will remain in 28. But the second proviso open market value, which is the deemed open market value, that will be rejected. Normal open market value will apply.
Yes. To supplement this, my suggestion, I mean, rather, what I want to say is, the Rule 28 is applicable when section 15.4 becomes applicable, which means that first you have to apply section 15.1 to any particular transaction. It may be any transaction, whether it is a distinct person or principal agent or anything, except those mentioned, the specified supplies, which I'm going to, that would be my next line of discussion. Except those cases, in all other cases, general cases, section 15.1 is applicable, and if that fails only, 15.4 will become applicable. In which event we'll have to apply, we'll have to see which rule is applicable. Suppose it is not a money consideration, then Rule 27 is applicable. If it is going to be a distinct person, then 28 is applicable. That is my understanding. Therefore, in Rule 28, you will have to apply the sequential steps, which is the first step, which is the second step. And in that, the two provisos that are mentioned do not come as the the last methods or anything. It in fact goes in line with the first step itself. That is first or second step itself.
No, I am not still clear. I just asked one question. Supposing 100% input tax credit is available for a transaction like that, then will second proviso take over first proviso, or you have to exhaust first proviso and come to second proviso?
So you're asking, here, Raghavan, please answer that.
Between the first proviso and second proviso, there is no sequential application at all. So if full credit is available, you have to directly go to second proviso, but first proviso is available to you as an option.
That is it. That's what I said. So therefore, what happened? My invoice value becomes the assessable value or transaction value.
Correct.
You call it in whatever name.
Correct.
The intention of that rule is to take me out of the rules and put me into 15.1. That's what I said.
No, that is not transaction value. That is open market value.
No, it may not be. It may not be a transaction value.
Correct.
But I get the option. Yeah, 15.1. You adopt invoice value.
Yes,
that's what I said.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll just make one point here.
Yes.
There's one point here. See, 28 has two provisos, as
correct.
Rightly pointed out by Raghavan. The first proviso has option. Both provisos use the term shall. So when you come to the, even sequentially, if you come to the first proviso, it says at your option. Always choose not the option. Then you travel down to the second option and then straight away get into that ITC, full ITC, go. Or you can stop with the first option and the department need not put you through the second option at all. Because it says first is an option. Once you exercise that first option proviso, department has no business to say, no, you have to go back to the second one. For ITC is there. No, they can't do that. So the reason why they have not used the word option in the second proviso, because it is redundant actually. The first proviso is option. Obviously, exercise the option, close the transaction. There ends the matter. There is no need to travel down to the second proviso at all. Alternatively, if you have chosen to exercise the first option, you are at absolute full liberty to get into second option, exercise that and close. The other point which Raghavan, I think probably you have to throw some light on this, Aparna. The 28 is actually, it says value of supply between distinct or related persons other than through agent. So that through agent is taken into a separate independent rule. We are not on that. There's no issue. So primarily it applies to distinct person and related parties. So distinct person is a typical example is a branch transfer. Related party is a typical, it could be a group company or something like that, where it's a different legal entity. But my view is that, again, Raghavan, you probably have to correct me if I'm wrong. They couldn't have combined the provisions for both these distinct person versus related party into one rule. They should have probably had a separate rule because it may not give so much of clarity. Yes, sir.
Joseph, I think we'll continue with this, but I think there are some others who have a lot of questions.
Yes.
Let them
No, before that, one thing to...
Can we just bring in a few other questions, sir? They are all asking.
One minute.
Sir, ava mudikatume sir, konjam ninga.
Sir, Joseph sir, Vishnathan sir, Aparna madam, and we don't have the privilege of asking questions today. We are all in the panel. Others will ask questions.
All right.
கேள்வியும் நானே பதிலும் நானே.
இல்ல நான் வந்து இந்த பேனல் இந்த கெபாசிட்டி ஆஃப் பேனல் கிடையாது, இந்த கெபாசிட்டி ஆஃப் பார்ட்டி.
In fact,
immediately succeeding your presentation.
Then Satish has raised a very valuable point which we have to address. So one by one, please raise your hand.
Yes.
And you can ask questions.
Ramesh sir, you can come in first, sir. Ramesh sir, Mr. T.R. Ramesh sir. Okay, I think he is not available. Rohan, come in with your question.
So I have a two. Hi, this is Rohan. I have a twofold question. One is with respect to interpretation of Rule 27. One thing which is haunting me in Rule 27 is where it says that where the supply of goods or services is for a consideration not wholly in money. So whether a classic barter transaction where there is no money will be covered by 27 or not, because it says consideration should not be wholly in money. So does it mean that part of the consideration should be in money and it should not be wholly in money? So can I take an argument that for a classic barter transaction where there is no consideration at all, Rule 27 will not cover that particular transaction, and I will have to go to Rule 30 or Rule 31 for that matter, because Rule 28 and 29 are specific. Rule 27 is not wholly in money, it does not include no money. I'll go to Rule 30. My second question is, what competence of the...
One by one.
Okay, yeah.
So basically, whether not wholly,
It's not wholly. Rohan is right.
demand, some part of it should definitely be in money. That's what you're asking.
Raghavan has started.
No, what he says is, suppose it is 100 rupee value, even if it is 1 rupee, suppose 99 versus 1, then you will go out to Rule 27.
No. His question reminds me of that movie, that song, that Sindhu Nadi Misai, where Shivaji exchanges one article, the other Shivaji will give something else. It reminds me of that. So you have to answer that thinking, visualizing that particular scene.
No, Rohan, you know Tamil, you've seen that movie. Anyway, no, what he says is right, because it says...
Sir, this guy harasses me every day in office. So you can harass him.
No, even if it is 1 rupee is there without 99 versus 1, I think 27 will become inapplicable. As he rightly says, go on to 32, the 31 residuary. He is right.
So Rohan only took the first junior session for us, sir, and he was pretty good on.
Who, Rohan? Eh?
Yes, sir.
No, that is misclassification. He should be in the 4 of 5 p.m.
Definitely, he is here also.
I disagree with Rohan, but I want others to come in.
Yes, sir. Jay Kumar, sir, you can come in with your question, sir.
I am also with Raghavan.
Thank you. See, Raghavan, madam, and the other great panelists, I have one question. See, when you were explaining about Rule 27, you were referring to the illustrations given there. There were 2 illustrations in that. Illustration 1 said about a old mobile phone. I go and give it to the Purvika and get a new phone. That is captured in illustration 1. And illustration 2 speaks of a kind of a barter, but not wholly barter like Sindhu Nadi Misai. It is like a kind of where partly in money and partly because a laptop is definitely, definitely costlier than even the prices mentioned there is 4,000 to 40,000. Okay. Now, my first question is whether in the second transaction there are 2 suppliers. Meaning, the supplier of the printer has to pay the GST on the printer from this side for 4,000 rupees, and on the other side, that guy has to pay, the laptop he has to pay for 44 rupees. Is my first question. That is right, because all the parameters or all the metrics of a supply is satisfied, because there is a person, there is a consideration. Even for the printer, there is a consideration because that 4,000 rupees has been discounted in that laptop, hence there is a value. So if there is going to be 2 supplies or there are 2 supplies in that, if that is so, in the first example or in the first illustration, see that second-hand, old phone will not form of a, there also it should be valued and it should be added to the value of the original phone. So they are going, that's a different example. Any part barter or barter, there are 2 transactions. I give a printer, you give me a laptop, is second transaction. I give a old phone, you give me a new phone, is another transaction. Also, why they have not said that the old phone should be valued for 4,000 rupees and the guy, if legal loan is going to be in 20 lakhs exemption, I'm not talking about that. Is it also a supply, a old phone giving to Bhumika And if I am a supplier in all other parameters, if I satisfy, then whether old phone should also be valued and GST has to be paid. The last is, are we taxing consideration also? By tax, that is also another way of looking at it. From one end, it is a supply agree. The other supply, it is a consideration payable. So, in other words, are we taxing a consideration? Yeah, actually, the panel please.
The day before yesterday, I was talking about the pot of cream. Whether it is a consideration or whether it is a supply, the very essential aspect which has to be every transaction will have to look into whether that particular item would be a consideration or a supply. It is
wonderful. The Tolma I am trying to derive Tolma for the old phone guy or for the printer guy. His intention is not to supply a printer. Instead of 4,000 rupees, he is giving that what he has in excess.
Exactly.
Or for the 2,000 rupees, he is giving I mean, you opened up a great on that. That's why this question is coming up.
Exactly.
Please, I leave it to your panel to,
That is why this non-monetary consideration is going to be a very beautiful area of litigation, which we are going to see in future years. Definitely, it's going to be extremely interesting. I'm just waiting for the kind of arguments that are going to emanate and kind of judgments that are going to emanate. It's a very beautiful area. That's my view.
Raghavan, your views on that, please.
Yeah. So, to my mind, Prithvi, can you mute others? Some disturbance from the.
Yes, sir, I'll mute it.
From the background. Yeah.
I was not audible.
Raghavan sir, you can unmute yourself and start, sir.
Yes, sir. Jaikumar sir was very much audible. He was asking me if he was not audible. He was very much audible. Prithvi, you just tell me if I am not audible.
Yes,
okay. So, I have.
So you're perfectly fine, sir.
Okay. I have a 3-step answer to it. Benjamin on sale of goods, when he talks about barter, he talks about barter and exchange. In fact, this particular para would have been extracted in first Gannon and Girley also by the Supreme Court. And he differentiates barter was an exchange. And he says differences in barter, what drives the transaction is the need. I may barter only 2 kgs of rice for a horse. But in exchange, usually it is given again by money. Though I may give you goods and I may get only goods in return. But what we do is we denominate both the goods into money value, and then we will see if it is a matching money value is given in return or not. And therefore, exchange is slightly different is what he feels. And he uses a concept called a reciprocal consideration. So for my supply, your supply is the consideration, and for your supply, my supply is the consideration, and therefore it becomes a reciprocal consideration. In fact, as a concept, it is not new to us. GST is digging all these things out, and all these things are surfacing. If you all remember our old Hindustan Steel case, the 25 STC 211, that famous Hindustan Steel, where all of us will incorporate that case for penalty. To talk about penalty, how a patentic approach should not be adopted, all these things. For technical breach and all, there should not be penalty. All those things we apply. The actual facts in the case was similar to this. That was a case where a construction contract was to be done, for which steel was supplied to Hindustan Steel. So, whether that steel value is to be included in the construction contract value or not was the question. And that is what the court decided. Similar to N.M. Goyal, our famous N.M. Goyal in sales tax, what it says is, if we enter into a contract whereby we say that my contract value is 1 lakh, and if you supply me the steel, then I will reduce the value of steel and then I will charge you only 70,000. And in that case, clearly in my hands, when I do the supply, I have to include the value of steel also and pay on 1 lakh. And on the other side, you will be liable for 30,000. On the other hand, if I say I will do the construction using the steel you have to make available, and the value is 70,000, maybe we can get out of it. So in all cases where the contract provides for a supply to be made by the other side, and that supply value is treated as non-monetary. There is also a supply in the hands of the recipient. So in this case, be the printer example or be the old mobile phone example, to my mind, there is indeed a supply by the buyer. And as Mr. Jayakumar said, if it satisfies all other requirements, etc. So we are presuming that all those requirements, if those are satisfied, it will be liable to tax. On what value it will be taxed in these hands? Maybe you have to determine the open market value of the old phone. Maybe. That's why I said, in determining the open market value of in determining the value in the hands of the supplier of the new phone, you have to determine the open market value of the new phone. If you go to the other side and determine the value in the hands of the buyer, there is indeed a supply. And in a sense, maybe you have to determine the open market value of the old phone. That is possible. But to my mind, it seems there are two supplies. And whatever is treated as consideration in my supply is actually a supply in his hands. And maybe my supply is his consideration. I mean, it is already known to the courts because it is treated like that in the past. So to my mind, it can be taxed like that.
Meaning both the exchange as well as the barter.
No. Barter and exchange are completely different species altogether. Rohan's question was barter. Answer is not wholly 27, inapplicable, go to 31. If it is exchange, as rightly explained by Raghavan,
one second.
This is a goel,
Joseph,
then these separate two different supplies will happen.
No, Joseph, one second. I just wanted to clarify from Raghavan, whatever he clarified. My understanding is, Raghavan, are you saying that in both the illustrations 1 and 2, the exchange of a old phone as well as in the barter of a printer, in both the illustrations, both sides can become taxable if all other parameters are satisfied? Am I right? Is it what you tried to tell me? Or you distinguished a barter and an exchange and said exchange is not taxable and only barter would be because of the reciprocity?
Okay, sir, the first disclaimer I make is not on which rule is applicable. I am not on rule. I am only on the taxability per se. Which rule will be applicable, and we have to deal with the Rohan's question. That's the next step.
No, I agree. The question was also not on which rule.
Yeah, that's the next step that we have to still, Joseph was whether that we have to still deal with. That's a separate point. But whether it is a supply at both ends.
And now we'll go to Joseph.
No, sir. I will just clarify here. Insofar as exchange versus barter is concerned, in GST, according to me, there is no difference in treatment. Under the sales tax legislation, where non-monetary consideration was not taxable at all, there the difference between exchange and barter could have been relevant. But here, where we are taxing both monetary and non-monetary consideration equally, to my mind, exchange and barter both are taxable at supply at both ends. There is no difference. Which rule to apply?
If I can add or supplement, rules, section 7 itself, when it says what is supply, it would, it would say supply includes barter and exchange.
Absolutely.
So exchange is also a form of a supply.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Therefore, there is. Which rule should apply? Rohan's question.
That is different.
It is different. I disagree with Rohan. That also I am placing on record. In other words, I am saying 27 itself.
Jayakumar.
Yeah, Joseph.
Just 2 points.
Yeah.
Barter and exchange are to be dealt with separately.
Understood.
You can't apply the same rule on valuation.
Agreed.
So naturally, as a consequence, a different rule will apply.
But the question was whether it constitutes a supply on both the ends. That's the question.
That you have answered. No, rule 7. If barter includes, barter is a supply.
So next time when I am going to exchange in Purvika, I have to carry a GST registration.
No, you are not. You are not a taxpayer. No, you are not a registered taxpayer.
If at all I cross 20 lakhs.
If it is there is no RCM, there is no problem now. There is no reverse tax.
You already crossed this.
Hema wants to say something. Hema wants to say something.
My question is also linked to this. Won't Purvika become liable to tax on reverse charge mechanism here?
Hema, today there's no reverse charge under GST, so there's no problem as of today.
No, but
then why go into the valuation of the old phone at all?
No, today there is no RCM, so there is no problem.
Correct. So why go into the valuation of the old phone at all?
No, I'm not saying you go into the valuation of old phone at all. All I'm saying is barter to be dealt with separately, exchange to be dealt with separately. That's all.
Hema madam,
Rohan's question was whether barter rule 27 will apply or rule 31. The answer is rule 31. That's all.
Madam, reverse charge is not there, as Joseph sir clarified, but forward charge between a distributor and a laptop distributor, both can be liable under forward charge.
Yes. Then at both ends, why do we have to go for valuation?
Correct. At both ends, therefore it is irrelevant.
No, question is, why do you value the old phone if the concept of reverse charge mechanism is not there? That is for the purpose of valuing the consideration which flows not in the form of money, but in the form of an item.
No, the old phone is
no, I will
GST registered old phone dealer. So I mean, we are talking about.
I will just give
as an individual. Then we need not discuss about that. But if the old phone or printer, all these things is flowing from a GST dealer, then forward charge is applicable. Therefore, valuation is relevant.
So then I'll just give an illustration. Suppose I have an iPhone which is 2 years old, maybe worth today about 50,000 rupees. I go and give it to Purvika. I take another phone, probably Samsung, which is 50,000 rupees. There's not even 1 rupee which is exchanged between me and Purvika. Now the position will be whether this transaction is taxable at all. Yes, because barter is taxable. What is the value to be taxed in the hands of Purvika? It is 50,000 rupees. We have to arrive at that value, OMV. That you go there. Then the third question is whether reverse charge will apply to Purvika because they have to take my value. The answer is because reverse charge is not there. Now suppose instead of 50-50, it is 51,000 and 50,000. It will still be 51,000 in the hands of Purvika, and it won't be rule 27 but rule 31 because it is exchange and not barter.
Okay, there is one question.
Sir.
One question from Satish also. 1 minute.
Yes.
Satish has sent one message in the chat asking whether the GST valuation rules are simpler than the customs valuation rules, that the customs valuation rules are extremely comprehensive.
Can I answer that, Raghavan?
Please mute others.
Raghavan, can I answer that question?
Please answer, Joseph.
No, I have to be a little informal. I have to tell you some joke. You know that some Surli Rajan or somebody will go to one shop, sweet shop. 1 kg, 1 kg halwa, 1 kg jalebi, 1 kg of all of the sweets. Then he'll say put all that in one vessel. Then he'll ask for 1 kilo. That is exactly what GST rules have done. So Satish Chandra's question is this. It's a mockery.
He wants to say something here.
Yeah, hello. Sir, can I ask one question?
I don't agree with Joseph. It's
Shafiq,
not
sir, 1 minute.
I think it's very scientific and a sequential rule. Of course, the application we'll have to see, but I feel the rules are quite okay.
No,
sir, customs valuation.
27 to 34 is.
Customs valuation is purely based on GATT valuation code, and it is based on international experience, and a lot of minds have gone into it. Therefore, customs valuation is a stand apart. GST, to some extent, I agree with Joseph sir, only in saying that they have adopted the best practices from different laws. Therefore, whatever they could do, because customs valuation is easy because they don't have services to be valued. Even they don't have to value intangibles. But GST is not like that. It has to be more broad-based because it takes into account a lot of things which are covered. Therefore, they have to give a common rule which has to take into account intangibles. They have to take into account services. They have to take into account many things which happen between parties where credit is available. Therefore, GST has to be a broad-based rule. It cannot be as scientific as customs valuation. But this rule, I think, is good enough to deal with majority circumstances.
Now, to supplement that, some part of the customs rules like residual method, cost of services, customs valuation rule, certain provisions have been dug out and put it here. Like central excess valuation rules, rule 6, price is the sole consideration. What is the absence of consideration? Those principles have been carved out, and to the best possible effort, they have put it for valuation of both goods and services, is my view.
So they have not taken into account the concept of amortization, which is so basic. So 28 VAT legislation, customs valuation, excise valuation, service tax valuation, they have done something, but it does not come out the way it ought to have come. Amortization is completely left out.
No, sir, I differ with you there.
Sir,
because
sir, rule 6.
Why, I tell you one thing.
No, sir, there is a rule 6, sir. There is a rule 6 which specifically talks about supply of molds, dyes, all of that by...
Kindly hear me out. There is no concept of notional value under GST.
Yes,
even if you supply input, this one point we have missed. If the buyer supplies input, this is not absence of consideration. This is not part of the price. This will not attract any of the valuation rules. Under 15.2, the cost of input supplied by the buyer need not be included in the valuation of GST. Am I right, Raghavan?
Yes, sir. I mean, broad level it is right, but I mean, nobody can decide who is right and who is wrong because it's so general. So therefore,
no, they have even GST Council has clarified. One point we have not spoken is on the valuation of job working. See, job working, you may supply your material and get back.
Amortization.
So the material value is not included there. Sir?
Sir, my anguish is when there was a specific rule for amortization, and today when supply includes goods, what is the loss for the government to?
I think we'll just wind it up. It's going on and on, isn't it?
No, I think
I have one question.
Yeah.
No, I just have one question.
We will meet and talk about this intrinsic value, why it is not here.
Short question which I wanted to ask. See,
I'm sorry, Shafiq and T.R. Ramesh are waiting for a long time. You just finish.
Yeah, please.
See, I have one fundamental. Prithvi, Shafiq here. Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
See, my fundamental question is what is, as I understand it, everyone appears to be on the same page saying that there is a distinction between barter and exchange. What is the difference?
Sir, what I was saying is in exchange, the exchange is happening with underlying money value determined for that. That's what I'm saying. As I was starting, sir, barter is classic need-based transfer, but in exchange, though goods is supplied for goods, what goods is to be supplied for which goods, that is decided by determining the monetary value of those that is exchanged. Therefore, it is called as exchange, is what I was saying. That's where we started, sir. I started.
I see. Okay. See, I think there I have a slightly different view because if you see in 55 STC Premier Electro or something, they rely upon 62 ITR and 72 ITR where there is a price fixed and there's an exchange of commodities. Once there is a price which is fixed and thereafter then they said it is cancellation of one debt by another. It will continue to retain its character as a sale because the price is originally fixed and in discharge of that obligation to pay the price, you give some other product. And therefore, I had a view that exchange is possibly relating to immovable property. Maybe I'm wrong there.
No, I was also saying that this exchange is not a barter, it is liable to tax as it has a reciprocal consideration, is what I said. Reciprocal consideration.
I think they have said it is a sale. They have not even said it is an exchange. They have said even prior to 46th Amendment, it would constitute a sale. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I was
also saying it is sale at both ends in the by calling it as an exchange for a reciprocal consideration. I was saying it could be taxed as a sale because there is a reciprocal consideration which is monetary in the cylinder.
Very well. So I just wanted that clarification. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Ramesh wants to come in.
Yes, yes. Sir, my question is regarding that specified supplies under Rule 32. Your slide regarding specified supplies under Rule 32. Am I audible?
Your voice is excellent.
Oh, okay.
You should tell us which
This
instrument
is
are you
regarding the person dealing with second-hand goods on which no ITC is taken. You have stated that taxable value would be difference between selling price and purchase price, and it should be ignored if negative. If it is negative, what is the value, sir? Is it 0?
There's no liability at all. See, when a VAT provision, actually.
Supply is there, no?
No, there's a VAT provision. This is not emanating out of excise or service tax. There's
okay.
Parallel provision to each of the state VAT tax. Second,
okay.
After the ITC VAT was.
No, this is more akin to that Rule 6 of Senvat credit rules, where where there is an explanation to that effect. Hello?
Yes, yes. Please go on.
3 possibilities, sir.
I feel that it should be invoice value. It cannot be 0. Please correct me if I am wrong.
It may be ignored in the meaning there is no tax liability. That's all. You don't have to pay any GST.
If there is supply, there should be a liability, no? Unless it is exempted.
Sir, government sir, why do you want to pay?
No.
Negative means you have to ignore.
அதான் சார் நீங்க 10,000க்கு ஒரு கார் வாங்குறீங்க செகண்ட் ஹேண்ட் உங்களால 10-12,000 விற்க முடியல 8,000 வித்தீங்கன்னா how can the government demand tax on that?
I will just attempt to answer this, sir. I will just attempt to answer only this thing, and we can treat this as maybe the last question or so. Let us say I bought the car for 1 lakh and I sold it for 80,000, and the difference is negative, minus 20,000. And the provision says that negative value should be ignored. What you will ignore is minus 20,000. If you ignore minus 20,000, now what is the difference, sir? Because the provision still says difference only. If you ignore minus 20,000, then the difference between becomes 0 difference. So therefore, that's what it means. Negative value should be ignored means you cannot seek refund based on negative value. That's all it means. You cannot calculate a tax on negative value and say, no, government has to refund to me. That you cannot say.
But it's not audible. I presume that you have stated that it attracts GST, but I cannot seek refund.
No. He didn't say it attracts GST. He says no refund.
I can't hear anything. That's why I'm just.
Yeah, he didn't say GST is applicable. நான் 8,000 10,000 அவர் ராகவனுடைய லெவலுக்கு 80,000 1 லட்சம் சொன்னார் அவ்வளவுதான் வித்தியாசம்.
Ramesh.
Yes, sir.
Ramesh, one point you see there, the right to avail input tax credit is taken away from you. All right.
Okay, fine.
Now 1 lakh is on what you have paid tax already.
Okay.
Which is otherwise eligible for you to take credit. In that event only you have to show a value addition.
Yes, sir.
Now you are foregoing 1 lakh, which is already a payment made to the government. You don't make any value addition.
Okay.
So you don't go into liability or liability of the GST.
But my doubt is input tax credit is different, supply is different.
You see, in this particular scenario, they have related that. They have said it is like an exemption. If you don't take Senvat credit or input tax credit, you don't pay tax. Your final liability only on the value difference. Since there is no value difference, there is no tax liability.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Fine. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Sir, I think we have already crossed the time now. So with the panelists' permission, I would like to call in Swaminathan sir, because today is G. Suresh sir's second.
Pratik, I'll just proceed on this one.
Yes, sir.
Today is the second death anniversary of our junior standing counsel, Mr. K. Suresh Kumar.
Oh God, my old friend.
Department, this one.
Why a second, sir? Why a second? We will make it 1 minute, no problem.
Absolutely, sir. I leave it to everyone, and you can.
1 minute. 1 minute.
1 minute we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But before that, what payments are not coming? What are we doing?
It's all the procedural aspects, sir. We will see that separately.
Okay, but time start now.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti.
Thanks, Swaminath. I think
to his family members so that they will be so.
No, whatever help we could do, I could do.
Absolutely. I just.
I will be more. I mean.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. Whenever it is required, we will.
And thanks for making this here, because it takes us to the main issue that. Instead of keeping updated on the subject, I think we should all stay healthy also.
Absolutely, sir. Definitely.
So that's the message. Thanks for that. There's no point in keeping good practice unless you have good health.
Healthy, definitely. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Prithvi, what is tomorrow's session? Kindly announce the time also.
Tomorrow in the evening only we have a session. We don't have a morning session tomorrow and day after. Both the days till now we don't have any morning sessions. There will be only evening sessions. Tomorrow, Mr. R. Parthasarathy, sir.
Prithvi, can I check with Ramana Kumari? He wanted to do that insolvency. I put a something.
Already. Can we not keep it tomorrow and day after, sir? Because day after there is MBA meeting of Justice Rama.
Whenever possible.
Yes, sir. Next
slot
week,
you give.
Yes, sir. Next week actually we don't have a 11 o'clock session at all till now. So you can go ahead and ask, so then we can discuss with our senior members and then we can fix up a date, sir. Any day.
Sir, Rohan wants to ask one more question. There's a message. Rohan wants to ask.
Rohan is not. Rohan?
Yeah, just a small question. I think we can discuss it the next time also. Yeah. No, my only question was, when Rule 32 provides for specific valuation rules for air travel agent and life insurance, etc., what is the legislative provision which enables the same? I'm not able to find anything in Section 15 which allows the government to prescribe specific rules.
I wanted to ask this exactly.
No, Rohan, this is something which is already there in the service tax regime right from 1984 itself. The same thing they're continuing. I don't know whether, I mean, if you ask me where is the legislative competence in 84, I have no answer to that. But I thought it was there already.
No, it can be answered like this. It can be answered like this. Supposing you don't have such a provision, then this provision can be challenged by those service providers saying that it is draconian.
Absolutely.
What amount we don't, what amount we don't receive, you are charging us. That is draconian.
No,
So that
presumed that this legislative, I mean, the competence. If you raise that, I think probably yes.
Because it is beneficial, therefore we won't challenge. Is that what we are saying?
See, you can't charge them for something what is not flowing to them as consideration. That is the principle.
My understanding regarding these specified supplies is that you don't have to go through that sequential elimination of section 15.1. You can straight away go to those rules. That is my understanding. Am I right?
Yes. That, no, like that place of supply rules earlier, no, in the service tax law, it will say by default you will go into rule 3.
Yeah.
If you are not in rule 3, then you will have to apply each one of that, which is your specific.
So in the case of specific supplies,
exactly. So the same rule will apply here.
This 15.1 you don't have to. So it is notwithstanding 15.1, you have to apply this. Am I right?
No.
Yes. No, because there is no price.
Something to say.
There is no price charge in these cases.
No, I mean we cannot sidestep 15.1 here. That's why I think that is where Rohan's question starts. Because if we apply 15.1 and we have value, why should we go to this rule at all?
That is my question.
No, you can't come into rule 32.
No, my question is, unless you apply 15.1 and then go to the rule, or straight away go to the rule?
No. You have to go. You have to draw.
Sidestepping 15.
Sorry.
You have to go to 15.1, exhaust 15, get into 15.4. Only then rule 32.
Because there is one view like that. That is why I wanted to ask. There was one view like that.
But Raghavan, it is almost the same, Raghavan. I didn't even.
Sir, I mean, like with this question, we have to go back and see what was the authority there also.
No, not the authority, but the scheme of things. It is almost similar or identical to the service.
Similar, sir. As I was also saying, like rule 6 only. It is similar.
Yes. But I remember Raghavan, I remember under 15, specified cases will be decided by government. Some provision was made there. No, just see that provision.
I think sir is referring to 15 subsection 5.
Yes,
there is a provision.
15.5 is there. Kindly see that.
15.5 says.
You don't have the book.
Yeah.
15.5 there is a provision.
Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1 or subsection 4. Notified, sir. That is notified, which Raghavan has already dealt with. He said no service has been notified in this, no supply.
The rule is a notification, actually.
Yes. Correct. You are absolutely right.
I think we should end this, Raghavan. I think
today was one of the lengthiest discussion session which we.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area of discussion as well as litigation. So, but it will go on, and we'll never get to.
But I will only take 1 minute to clarify, Joseph, my view on 28. He was telling that 2 options. The first option is, second option is redundant. According to me, it is not like that. Because the first option is conditioned to adopting 90% of the fair market supply value or something like that. That is the condition. But when you come to second proviso, there is absolutely no condition. You can adopt the price and that will be treated as a price for assessment. Therefore, it is not redundant. It is not redundant.
No, I'm not saying, I never said redundant. I only said the AAAR ruling is perfectly right. As Raghavan had explained earlier.
No, I am not on AR. Everybody is accepted that.
Yes, AAAR is perfectly right. So before I close, I just want to clarify. It is not Surli Rajan, but Janagaraj. Yeah, thank you.
At least we had some clarification.
At least the consciences ad item was there. So no
I'm reminded of one old ad, Coffee Toffia. It will say the argument continues. So the argument is definitely going to continue.
But Raghavan, if you have not seen that comedy, that humor scene.
Sir, I was about to correct you there. But saying no, I have seen that. I was about to correct you there. But then I thought that is not relevant to the topic. Even if it is Surli Rajan and Janagaraj, you would have laughed. So
But Raghavan, when opportunity comes, we will also discuss. I have a different view with Joseph on one point on that barter, which is says 27 to you have to straight away go to.
Barter exchange, we can have a separate session itself.
I think we should keep a special session only for question and answers, only exclusive.
That should be not on a mobile like this. We have to meet and talk.
For that, we should wait for the lockdown to end, sir. Now.
Yeah, it will end by 3rd May.
Thanks a lot.
End the session.
Sir, so yes, sir, coming back for tomorrow's session. Tomorrow, Mr. Partha Sarthi sir will be taking us through GST in the evening.
First, give a round of applause to Mr. Raghavan for the efforts that he has taken.
A round of applause to Raghavan sir, Aparna ma'am, Joseph sir, and Vishwanathan sir for taking us through today for the longest session which we have had at 5 p.m. Thank you very much, sir.
It was our pleasure.
Yes, sir.
So much.
And on Monday, again, morning 11 o'clock is the MBA session of the Rama Subramanian. So we are not having any session in the morning. Evening, Venkatraman sir will be coming to host a seminar for Monday. The topics and the links will be sent now. Like for tomorrow's session, I send it by tonight. And for Monday session, tomorrow I will send the link.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm ending the meeting.
Yeah.